If Nicki Minaj claims to have so much proof that Jay-Z owes her $200 million, why hasn't she sued him yet? Let's discuss. Now, y'all know from my previous videos, I have been talking about Nicki Minaj a lot. And one thing I had not addressed yet was her beef with Jay-Z. So in 2015, Jay-Z buys Tidal and he ends up relaunching it. Tidal's big thing was that it was this artist-owned streaming service and that artists would get paid more compared to Spotify or Apple. Now a bunch of artists like Nicki Minaj, Madonna, Beyonce, Alicia Keys, Rihanna, Kanye West, they attended the Tidal launching event and they were listed as co-owners of this new Tidal streaming service. Reports state that they were each supposed to receive 3% of Tidal. Now, despite all of these artists being such a big part of the relaunch of Tidal, it really flopped bad. Now, the problem with Tidal really was its marketing. Tidal tried to come into the music streaming space, which is already a really tight space to begin with. And it really focused on artists getting paid fairly and artists, getting paid higher rates for streaming, which is a reputable cause. We can acknowledge that. But Tidal didn't really solve any problems for consumers. So it is no surprise that by 2020, 5 years after its launch, Tidal only had 2.5 million subscribers compared to Spotify that had 138 million at the time. So in 2021, Jay-Z sells Tidal and there's not an exact number that's been put out there, but there have been several reports that put it at just under $300 million. So in 2024, when it was announced that Kendrick Lamar would be performing at the Super Bowl for 2025, Nicki Minaj took to Twitter and she was ranting about how it should have been Lil Wayne. And we know that Jay-Z is pretty much the person who gets to decide who performs at the Super Bowl. He's also one of the co-producers of the halftime show. So she took this opportunity to air out all her grievances with Jay-Z. And one of those grievances was that he allegedly owes her between $100 and $200 million for Tidal. And look, I'm not saying that Nicki's lying about this or that there's no truth to her statement. I'm just super intrigued by the numbers in the math that she's done, because if it's true that she and other artists all started out with a 3% stake in the company and then he later sold it for $300 million, under what circumstances would he owe her $200 million, even $100 million? That would be 33% of the company. Steve Stout, a record executive, he very publicly suggested that the reason Nicki Minaj wasn't paid any money from Tidal was because she allegedly never signed the required Tidal paperwork. Nicki Minaj, of course, denies this, but if it is true, it just points back to my last video where I talked about how messy her businesses are and how she's just not a good businesswoman. So if it is true that Nicki Minaj is owed between $100 to $200 million from the sale of Tidal, why hasn't she sued Jay-Z? For one, I think that if the claims that she didn't sign paperwork are true, it means that she has no cause of action. She has no case. If this is the case, then I think that Nicki continues to bring this up on Twitter quite often because she wants to put public pressure on Jay-Z and Roc Nation so she can get her coin one way or the other. Another reason I believe that she may not sue Jay-Z is because of the clauses in the contract. A lot of times when you sign contracts in the music industry, it requires disputes to go through arbitration, which means you would have zero right to take the other party to court. You would just have to go through arbitration. Another reason I think Nicki might be a little bit more bark and no bite when it comes to this alleged lawsuit against Jay-Z is possibly due to discovery, which would mean that she would have to pretty much expose a lot of her financials. I think that she would have to bring in communications, deal documents, tax records. A lot of financials would be involved, and I don't think that she wants that out there publicly. We've already talked about how her businesses are all over the place and they're a little messy. I would not be surprised if some of her financials are a little bit all over the place too. And even more so if during discovery it is exposed that she knew that paperwork was allegedly not in place, it puts her at even more risk. Now they can take legal action against her. I just find everything pretty interesting because other artists like Rihanna and Beyonce, they kept their stake in Tidal even after it sold. So why is Nicki Minaj yet again the only one being singled out and the only one that was not paid? It almost adds a little bit more credence to the whole idea of paperwork being missing. Now I know that Nicki's fans love to talk about how Nicki is always one step ahead and how she, is playing the long game and is gathering all this evidence. I don't know if I believe that. I mean, ultimately, how long is the long game? Because in New York, there's only a 6-year statute of limitations for contracts. If the damages that Nicki incurred are related to the 2015 relaunch of Tidal, then she doesn't even have a case. She can't even take that to court. If it's related to the 2021 sale, she's never specified. If it's related to Jay-Z selling Tidal in 2021, then ultimately she has until 2027 But I would be surprised if it actually ends up happening. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Did any of that resonate with y'all? I just feel like it doesn't make sense in my head that if she is so confident that he owes her, you know, $200 million, and it would, you know, pretty much double her net worth, like, why hasn't she done it yet? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.